Hi, everybody, and welcome again to another week of MedHeads, which is MedCityNews.com's weekly discussion about the business of innovation in healthcare. My name is Chris Seper. I run MedCityNews.com, and we have a great panel today to talk about one of the most important trends, I think, that's happening in entrepreneurship, which is the notable migration or interest from the clinical side into the startup world. A funny anecdote early on, when MedCity started, we actually made a pointed pledge when we talked to people and said, we're really not interested and we don't think that clinicians read us. We want to we don't reach the doctor that treats feet. We reach the doctor who thinks they have a new product or research or a way to better treat feet, and they want to take that to market. Those optics are changing, and our panel is going to talk about those changes and their experiences and what are some of the challenges and issues to make sure that healthcare as an industry gets the most out of the clinicians, whether they're nurses or doctors or other people. We are joined by Dr. Wen Dombrowski, well known as Dr. Healthcare Wen on Twitter, and has helped in many ways shape the entrepreneurial discussion for many clinicians here. Wen, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. Also joining her, and she's based in New York. In San Diego is Meghana Keshavan. She writes about early stage innovation in life sciences, and she actually took part in MIT's Hacking Medicine, actually won it. Meghana.
Hi.
When's your first A round?
What's that?
When's your first A round with your hacking?
Working on it.
And also joining us is Stephanie Baum. She is MedCity News' digital health editor. She's based in Philadelphia. Stephanie, how's life?
Yeah, it's good.
Good, good. Well, we're doing this because it's an important topic, but Wen will talk more about herself and about this issue here in a second. Wen is actually moderating a panel discussion on this very topic at MedCity Converge, which is MedCity News' innovation conference happening September 1st and 2nd in Philly. So it's going to be one of the critical conversations that we have at that conference, and we wanted to have that, a little bit of that conversation, a sneak peek, if you will, ahead of that discussion. So Wen, tell people more about you. We're honored to have a guest here at MedHeads. And then tell us your point of view about what you're seeing when it comes to the clinical side, coming to the startup side.
Great, thank you for having me. So I'm Wen Dombrowski, and for those of you, if you don't know me, I'm a physician, internal medicine, and geriatrics, and a lot of my work has focused on how to improve the technology that underlines care, as well as what is the operational model and business model to provide better care for patients. I've done this before in the settings outside of hospitals, as well as working alongside with technology startups. And currently I'm working with North Shore IJ to really look at how do we operationalize the new healthcare reform initiatives that Medicare payment policy and other market trends have been really accelerating in the last few years. A big part of my role is actually helping the organization with its technology and communication strategy related to the development of these new care models.
So when we've been seeing, there was a great article in KQD in California that talked about doctors and the allure to startups. What have you seen over the years? I mean, are more doctors and nurses and other clinicians interested in the startup side, and what's that looking like?
Yeah, so I've actually been looking at non-traditional physician and clinician careers for over 15 years, and I've definitely seen in the last 5 years there's been really an explosion of both interest as well as people who are clinicians going into startups. And I think the KQED article is really great at highlighting physicians who've gone into technology startups, but I think it's important to also point out that software technology is not necessarily the only way to be an entrepreneur as a clinician. You can also be go into hardware engineering. There's also physicians and other clinicians I know that are working on biopharma. They started restaurants, they started new practice models, or travel companies, fashion companies, and humanitarian nonprofit social enterprises. So I think there's really a breadth of what career paths physicians can take, and it's not necessarily just being a clinician in an office or working shifts in a hospital, but really looking at how they can expand the ways their experience, like using their experience and their skill set, how they can really make a difference in ways beyond that one-to-one patient setting.
Meghana and Stephanie, let me ask you: does that jive with what you've seen as you've talked to startups that have physicians as leading them or as part of the management team?
Oh, absolutely. I actually kind of want to bring up a mildly personal experience just because it's a friend of mine. He's a neonatologist, and this is probably not the motivation for most doctors out there, but this is the motivation for him. He is, he's starting up his own startup, and part of it actually is because once upon a time, medicine used to be a lucrative career where you could make a lot of money, and now medicine is a place where you pay a lot of insurance and you have a set salary, and it's a good lifestyle, but you're not going to become like a millionaire. So with my friend, the neonatologist, he is starting, an app just to, enter the business world because that's where the money is in his case. This is not the case with all clinicians, obviously, but it was sort of an interesting case, that entering the business world is a way to monetize your skill set just a little bit. But alternatively, also, like I participated, as Chris said, in a healthcare hackathon at MIT, and there were so many physicians participating in it, trying to create startup ideas to tackle, real holes, real gaps in the system, and things like that, and where there needs to be a better solution. And as you said, my team won, and we had a palliative care doctor on the team, and he had won a previous hackathon also. And he had absolutely no business savvy, but he wanted to enter the entrepreneurial world because there's so much potential there to make change. But it's just, it's kind of interesting how doctors are looking towards business as an opportunity where they can see themselves fit, but they don't always necessarily know the right ways to go about it, if that makes any sense. Sorry, I sort of detoured a couple times.
And Stephanie, maybe, and anybody can ask this, but I'll start with Stephanie. Stephanie, I mean, obviously most life science innovations come from a lab in which a researcher, a medical researcher or otherwise, has found this innovation. Digitally, it can come from anywhere. So is there a type of physician entrepreneur that enters that digital side of the coin, right? Are they young? Are they, do they have a certain point of view? How have you seen it, Stephanie?
Sure. I mean, I think when I first started doing this, when I first joined MedCity News, it was mainly like, people that were interested in developing apps or that sort of thing. But now it's much more about an attempt to trend on the younger side. People that were in medical school taking a year off and just saying, hey, this seems like an exciting area of opportunity. There's a lot of investment money flowing around. This seems like a good time. And I guess a few years later, there's still some of that, but there's far more older, more mature entrepreneurs that were physicians that they want to be in control of the fate of healthcare, and they don't want it to just be done. They don't want these changes to be done by administrators or technology geeks. They see a way to influence the development and advance the development of healthcare by taking what they know of physician workflows and years of experience working in hospitals and putting it to good practical use because they've seen firsthand what some of the gaps in care are. I mean, one of the startups that I wrote about pretty recently, he is a physician and saw a tremendous lack of palliative care options, particularly in rural communities, and wanted to use telemedicine as a way of kind of facilitating that. It's an interesting company, but it's sort of seeing specific problems that are an unmet needs in healthcare and wanting it to respond to that and having that insight. And I think that is something that comes of being in healthcare for many years.
So, Wen, let me go back to you. Is there a type when you look at the trend of doctorpreneurs?
I mean, I think the physicians and clinicians that I see that tend to become entrepreneurs are people who really like to solve problems, not necessarily just to make money and not necessarily just to, be an A+ student, but they actually want to solve problems, and they're seeing the problems around them. They're seeing the problems that their patients are having, or they're seeing the problems that their family members are having, and and it really, it gives them that itch to want to change something. And I also think that the physician entrepreneurs and other clinician entrepreneurs, there's a tendency to want to create new ways of doing things, so they don't just accept and sit back and accept that it's always going to be the way it's always going to be, but actually really be involved in thinking about how do we actually change the current way to make it better. And I think, not everyone can be an entrepreneur, and certainly not everyone can be a successful entrepreneur, and a key ingredient is the willingness to take risks and to have courage to be able to really to not be afraid to fail, and at the same time be willing to learn from mistakes and to also learn from successes. And these are all components that, while it might seem, some people would assume everyone has this, but I actually think it's a smaller subset of the population and smaller subset of clinicians in general.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling about doctors has always been that physicians typically are a risk averse. Often they're, I mean, when you think about the people who are often standing in the way of things like telehealth or whatever, you look at the AMA, right? And then also, I love my father-in-law. My father-in-law is an oncologist, hematologist, right? Very conservative in business, right? Don't want to move too quickly, and often just bad at business. And so, and also, startups have to be nimble, change quickly, and often without a lot of evidence, right? Which is the opposite of how physicians typically make decisions. Mm-hmm. It seems that it's counter to what you're taught in med school than to go on to be a physician. I don't know. That's a point of view, and I'd love reaction from the panel on that.
I mean, I'd love to comment on that. So I think traditionally, and even nowadays, a lot of people go into medicine, and I've watched a lot of my classmates and friends where all their life when they were a kid, they were told, do well in school, get good grades, then you'll get to go to a good college, and then you'll get to go to a good grad school, and then you'll get to make money, and then you'll get to buy a house and, have a family, and then you'll be successful in life. And this is I think this is the mantra that a lot of families and a lot of cultures have instilled in the previous generations, and yet the current generation, I feel like there's more both parents and also the individuals young people who are willing to really think beyond what is the traditional mold. So for people who go into med school, it is very regimented. So let me give an example. So if you know you want to be a doctor, you go to high school, and then you go to college, and in college you're supposed to volunteer, and then you take the tests, and then you apply for medical school, and then in medical school, you're supposed to do your rotations and go to residency, and residency is a very fixed number of years, and then after that, you're going to go and become a physician attending. And all of this is completely predictable in terms of timeline. And even when you're working as in a training mode or as a physician, usually your call schedule a year in advance. So, if right now it's August, a lot of attendings will know that on June 25th, that's the day that they're on call that night, or that's the day that they're scheduled for vacation. So the system really tries to create physicians in this mold of, these are the steps you're required to take. Do not deviate from these steps. Anyone who deviates from these steps are really seen as outliers. Obviously, there are some medical schools and some training programs that are becoming more open-minded to this and allowing people to explore beyond the traditional step-by-step path, but it's still pretty much the paradigm in most of medical education and training.
Well, and let me throw this out, Stephanie and Meghana. In part, I also think there's a gap in physicians and clinicians, and I'm just going to chalk it up to this, knowing what's out there. I mean, if Shark Tank is our entrepreneurship barometer, right? Physicians get slaughtered on Shark Tank. I mean, it is littered with the path of well-intentioned doctors who think they've got something, awesome, and just get annihilated by Mark Cuban. And I think it's amazing because they don't seem to either know the resources or just flame out. I mean, Stephanie or Meghana, if you've seen some of these, like, What's the performance been when you look at docs who do go on these shows?
Well, for one thing, I don't think Shark Tank is a really accurate way of assessing.
I think Shark Tank is everything.
I think, and I would be surprised if Wen disagreed with me on that one. But I mean, it's because I think that if you can't treat healthcare like as every other industry. I mean, there are certain things that you know, software either does what it's supposed to, for example, or it doesn't. A person does a good job of explaining their product, or they don't, to lay people. But you know, I think that's where the sort of the similarities end. I mean, what do you think, Meghana?
I agree with that. I have to say that in my little world of coverage, life sciences companies don't tend to be headed up by the clinician sorts necessarily. It's more of the academic researcher, the doctor who is involved in, you know, like, just, you know, it'll be the university doctor, you know, as opposed to the straight up clinician that I deal with. But I think that the tech transfer environments are improving so remarkably when it comes to helping out, you know, biotech companies and medical device companies, and by extension also these, you know, health IT companies, that I think that it's creating this environment where clinicians also are saying, hey, it doesn't have to just be the researchers or the, you know, the standard industry folks. Like, you know, I can jump in. I've got an idea. I see the gap in the system, and I think that because this overall environment has become more receptive, it's become, you know, easier to get involved. I don't necessarily think that, you know, like as I said, not every clinician has the business savvy straight off the bat, but
Right.
which is why of course might see the flameouts on Shark Tank. I saw a couple good ones, honestly. Like they haven't all been so bad, but you know, I think that there's just the overall market is just more accepting of you know, outside opinions, which is, again, I'm going to bring up my little hackathon experience because I'm so proud of it. Like, it was, you know, our businesses or whatever, our business models ended up making sense because they did have perspectives of all kinds of folks, including the straight-up clinicians. So.
Well, I'm going to go into that because I think one of the things we should talk about is the resources that would help somebody go from the clinical side or the physician, the nurse, you know, researcher side into the entrepreneurial side. So what was the? I mean, it seems like hackathons are part of that model. So can you delve into that from the idea of how it helps a physician?
Well, I mean, just like I said, speaking from personal experience, like I happen to have a good overview of the healthcare industry, but I don't have knowledge in the specifics. And then when I ended up teaming up with a clinician who had very detailed knowledge of the palliative care world, he didn't know what a Series A round was. He didn't know what, like, he barely knew what a venture capitalist was. You know what I mean? So, so these kinds of events are sort of springing up around the country. MIT is spearheading a couple of them in which to get these different disparate parts together, these different types of people, and educate folks on what may be on the opposite end of the spectrum, because you're going to need all of it to launch a successful startup.
If I can chime in, I think that one of the sort of problems historically is that the entrepreneurs tend to be either the sort of the scientists that have discovered these, or the clinicians that have developed this technology, but oftentimes they're not the ones that are going out and asking their prospective customers if this is something that they want, if this is something they need, how can they tailor it to meet them halfway. And I think that in recent years there's been much more interest in pushing physician entrepreneurs, pushing to go out and actually sort of talk to their prospective customers, and they're getting a lot of insight from that. And I think that's helping them in terms of taking what might be a very kind of technical concept and making it more accessible to prospective investors, which is where historically they've fallen down. And so, you know, the more programs like this that encourage and train and mentor physician entrepreneurs, the better, because they'll become more used to understanding, expressing an idea and presenting it in a way that resonates with their target audience.
Wen, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's several themes that we just talked about that I want to touch upon. So there's definitely right now on TV, whether it's Shark Tank or other shows, there's more exposure to the general public about the concept of startups. I think it's not just in healthcare, that just startups in general is something that more and more lay people and non-startup people are hearing about and wondering about and piquing an interest in. And I think also the other trend that I'm seeing is that within healthcare, the Health 2.0 movement, for example, there's a conference, for example, but what's very interesting is that there are local communities, local meetup groups, and local grassroots networking events, and that different organizations have put together to really try to bring together people who are not just clinicians, but people who are from all different stakeholder groups. One that comes to mind is I know that in Chicago there's been a very active group that Sue and Jasmine have put together, which has really focused on getting physicians who are interested in entrepreneurship involved, but also involving business people and investors, and really putting them together in events and in social networking and things like that. And I really believe that for entrepreneurship to be successful, you really have to build an ecosystem. It's not just about one person with a brilliant idea or one person with a lot of money, but you really have to have the expertise and the ideas and someone who knows how to execute to all be together. And sometimes you find that all in one package, and oftentimes you find it in disparate team members and different partners who have to work together.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. Every time I talk to a venture capitalist, they always say that, it's about the team and getting the right team dynamic in place, because you need the small number of people you need to fit all of these different.
Well, and let me ask this, what about nurses? Because I think that often, in these conversations, nurses are often the overlooked part of healthcare. And I remember one of my favorite TED Med talks ever was Sally Oken from Patients Like Me, who's a nurse. And I asked her why she made that leap into kind of going onto the business side of healthcare, and it's because she always thought that nurses were treated as a last resort in healthcare. And I wonder if any of you have had any insights on the value of nurses as they've gone into the entrepreneur space.
Yeah, so there are nurses out there who are entrepreneurs and also in non-entrepreneurial administrative roles. So clearly they also have a very close sense of what patient needs are and what caregiver needs are. Some nurses go into an entrepreneurial role after they've had many years of clinical experience, and others do it fairly early on in their career when they've identified pain points and potential solutions early on. I've seen, there's also, I don't know if you've heard of Maker Movement. That's not necessarily a startup per se, but it's an organization that's trying to get nurses to come together and create solutions and create ideas. It's based off of Maker Movement, but it's called Maker Nurse, and those are really great events to really stimulate creativity and stimulate problem solving, but to give people some tools and some skills to do it. What I think is interesting with both nurses, physicians, physical therapists, and other clinicians is they might have a sense of what a problem is, and maybe they might have a vague sense of what their solution is, but a lot of times people have not been taught the tools of how to ideate and how to do user experience design and how to do customer validation and get feedback. And so if those physicians can partner with either other individuals or accelerator-like programs and business mentorship type programs, then they're going to be able to take their idea from just being a figment of their dreams and imagination to really figure out, is it something they can bring to market and how to bring it to market? Because most physicians are, and actually most clinicians are not taught how to market and how to sell things. It's really been shunned in most of the medical community because I think some people don't have a great understanding of the fact that if you really have something that's awesome, that's going to change people's lives and really make a difference, then you ought to promote it and you ought to let people know about it, because what good is an invention if it just sits on the shelves of the basement of a university and never just see the light of day?
Well said.
Can I just jump in for a second just to sort of continue Wen's point? I mean, it's interesting because you're also seeing health IT accelerator or medtech accelerators like Dream Ventures and HealthBox partnering up with hospitals to actually help them sort of discover commercialization opportunities and help them form companies. I think Dream Ventures has a program called Open Canvas, and they've done this program with Open Canvas at Children's Hospital Philadelphia, and that actually led to the development of Haystack Informatics, which is a cybersecurity startup designed to provide kind of a visualization tool to make it easier to spot when people's healthcare records have been viewed by people who aren't authorized to. And I know at Intermountain Healthcare with their collaboration with HealthBox has led to a class of medical device and biotech startups, or I think it's more medical device startups. So those are some interesting examples of venture firms that are actually collaborating with hospitals to advance this, to train and mentor and develop these entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea for accelerators to partner with actual users and potential customers, because one of the things that I've been hearing a lot in the last couple of years from entrepreneurs who are really bright and have really great product ideas, like one of the biggest challenges is they don't know how to get their first customer or their first set of customers. They really can't get their foot in the door even though they've got an awesome product. So by having an accelerator who can bridge that gap into potential customers, even if it's just for early initial feedback, that really lets people, get past that first step, that first barrier of even finding someone to talk to, finding clinical and healthcare consumers to get feedback from. And I think that I think it's also, when a hospital is in one of these programs, it also creates more buy-in for them to try to help these startups be successful.
Well,
I feel like one. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Meghana.
Well, it's just the one challenge that I've seen again in the startups that I've talked to, and again, people I know. My dad is starting up a startup, and he's a physician. It's a matter of time too for a lot of clinicians. Like I think that accelerators could really step up and try and help with time management, because clinicians have their patient load. They've got to do their regular daily activities, and so I think that it's still challenging for a lot of the clinicians that I speak to and people who are in startups and they don't partner out with a larger organization or something like that, and they're trying to do it all themselves. They wind up being the ones that have the longer timelines and have a harder time getting the funding and things like that. So, I mean, I do think that these accelerators, just teaming up with hospitals and working right on the ground with clinicians, it's really important just to help people manage their own time. Also, if they have the good ideas, they need the tools to move it forward. So.
Well, let me. Oh, go ahead, Ron. We're getting close on time, and so let me wrap it up with one question, really, and because I think you've all touched on this need, and so let's go around and ask everybody here. We'll forgo our usual look at the news of the week, and say, if healthcare could do one thing to better extract the innovation, and this is the business side, that's sitting amongst clinicians, what should they do or what could they do? Wen, we can start with you.
So I think that the business side of healthcare should actually ask physicians and nurses and other clinicians what they think are ways to improve healthcare. And some people might not answer, might give answers that are just really not feasible, but I think if people are encouraged to be able to safely speak up about what they see are the big challenges, they're going to get a lot of good ideas, at least about the pain points. And then certainly it would be worthwhile to ask if they have any suggestions about potential solutions. I know this sounds very high level, but these basic steps are not being done in most healthcare organizations, whether it's a hospital or clinic or an insurance company. So really asking for feedback is number one, and part of the ethnographic user experience design approach.
Well, and I'll go second here and move on to Meghana. I think you're totally right. I also think that what's great about a lot of the digital startups is that they have complete naivete of healthcare, and so they come in and they have different perspectives that you wouldn't otherwise see. The downside is they have complete naivete of healthcare, and that can be a problem in getting themselves to market, right? And so I would love to see the day after match day, right? The day after all physicians are matched for whatever medical students were matched, that the startups reach out and they try to recruit those unmatched would-be doctors to spend the next year with them, with taking that healthcare expertise and that innovation and helping it help that startup. And then the doctor, of course, or would-be doctor, could go back and try to make that happen. I think any way we can get new thinking and healthcare thinking into early-stage companies, that's going to be an advantage. Meghana, what about you?
Can I just comment on that real briefly?
Oh, sure.
So I think it's not so much looking at physicians who haven't been able to match into a program. Certainly there are potential candidates, but I think it should be really open up to a wider field. I had heard that recently there's been more and more medical schools that are partnering with large tech companies to have internships or fellowships, and I've been in touch with a bunch of medical students who are from other medical schools, and they're like, wow, we would love to do that. We would love to be able to do a summer internship with Google or with whatever company, because a lot of it is just about exposure to ideas, exposure to skill sets, and even if they can't do it for a year, if they could even do it for a month or 3 months, it would be worthwhile. Unfortunately, a big challenge is that it's hard for people to take a full year off because the cost of medical education is so high that for every year you defer going into residency and getting a full-time physician job, that's medical loans that are just piling up and unpaid. So unless someone is independently wealthy or has a wealthy benefactor, that's actually a significant barrier to the creative juices that I know are present in a lot of physicians, but they just don't feel that it's practical to quit their job and just bootstrap for a year. And they have $200,000 of loans.
And you mentioned there are all those cultural, you're expected to go to the right school and then the right grad school and all this, so that people are already very enmeshed in this way of thinking, and I see that a lot. I do hear of medical schools also just having an entrepreneurship seminar involved in their curricula and things like that, which is good. I don't know. I think there has to be a way of helping physicians, like I said, manage their time a little bit better too, because they don't have the business savvy just straight out of school. That's not what's taught to them, and the whole operational side of business is very, very challenging. And so as you said, there are a lot of great ideas that are left on the table, and so there has to just be a better way to communicate these ideas, maybe make it a little bit more open, as you said. And
so I've coached a number of physicians, med students, and similar clinicians, and at the end of the day, the question for the individual that I ask is, if you have an idea for a product or company, is it that you want to be the CEO of the company and do everything yourself, or is it that you would just love to see someone do it and you would advise in that process? And I think the answer is really important, because one presupposes that that individual learns everything they need to know about businesses and finances and operations, and the other one presupposes that they find the right people to partner with. And I think in reality it's probably a combination of both, where you want to learn as much as you can and partner with good people. But there are a lot of physicians, if they don't feel, either because of financial reasons or for other reasons, if they can't just quit their current job, then there might be other ways they can be involved, and not necessarily be the CEO, but maybe be a co-founder or the chief medical officer and things like that.
But I do maintain there's still that subset of physicians that is in it for the money just a little bit. The physician that turns into the analyst, or the physician that decides that the salary is just not good enough. They're still out there too.
Oh, I agree. So there are definitely people from all different industries who are just in it for the money. I really do think that if they're just in it for the money, there are other industries that are more lucrative than being a physician. Unlike popular misconceptions that think that being a physician is very lucrative, and in most specialties in medicine, it makes a lot less than other professions, especially if you think about the lost opportunity, the opportunity cost, and the investment in education, and the lost salary from the 10 to 15 years that are required to to get there.
So Stephanie, what about you? What's your suggestion?
I mean, I don't know that I really have one. I mean, I think that
You had all that time. We've been gabbing back and forth. You could have bought a 6.
I'm just saying. I don't really think I have anything to add that's terribly different than what's already been said. I mean, you know, you do have I really don't think that.
You know,
I just can't articulate it this second.
you know what? I understand it. I understand it. Wen has been so good on this conversation that she has covered all the bases, and so we're gonna end with that. Wen, you were great. We love it. We love guests on MedHeads. Right? So listen, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you very much for participating. You know, every week, you know, we're trying to look at some of the big issues in healthcare with our team and with people who have really great insight, and I think we've done a great job this week. On behalf of Wen Dombrowski and Meghana Keshavan and Stephanie Baum, I'm Chris Seper. Thanks for watching MedHeads, and I hope to see you again next week.